Welcome, everybody, to our Leaders in Housing Counseling call. We are ready to dive right in. It looks like we have a good turnout, so that's great. Let's do a quick overview on just what the agenda will be. So the latest on federal funding, the latest on the Brian Montgomery nomination for FHA Commissioner. We'll spend the bulk of the call on our innovations in housing counseling. We have Myra Martinez from South Texas and talking about an innovative insurance company that they formed. They identified a market need and have really gone after it. Sounds like it's one that we can all learn something from. And then very briefly at the end, we'll do a piece on the Eviction Lab. I think probably people have seen the couple pieces of information we put out about evictions. This is hopefully an area that will be of growing attention. And depending on what you do, what services you provide, this may intersect with your work. And we've been very interested in trying to think about how to develop and expand the rental models. And this is a piece to that puzzle. And then finally, joining NHRC, we've had a terrific couple months here, lots of new members and certainly good renewals for the year. And I think we'll just do the usual plug we do. All right. Well, with that note, let's move on to where are we at on federal funding, Matthew?
All right. Not a ton to say here, but just we'll mention a couple things quickly. So we are on to FY 2019. The process in the House played itself out probably a month or so ago, and it's essentially not played itself out, but this kind of initial stage where it's now wrapped up in the Senate, where individual House members and senators either individually and submit their request to the THUD subcommittee, or the other opportunity is to sign on to Dear Colleague letters. I've actually not heard back from Senator Menendez's office on what their final list of signature signers was for their Dear Colleague letter. We had done really well in the House. We had we had more than we had ever had in the past on that Dear Colleague, so I hope we did as well in the Senate. But now it's kind of, handed over to the THUD subcommittee. They've gotten their input from their colleagues, and they will start working on a bill. So this is relatively still early in the process, but that it's kind of an important step. The other thing that to update folks on is Secretary Carson did his testifying. All the cabinet secretaries come in and talk to the various appropriations subcommittees about the administration's budget requests. The one thing we wanted to flag that Bruce had circulated yesterday was Senator Daines from Montana, who's a Republican, took the opportunity at the THUD, the Senate THUD hearing, to really talk up the value of housing counseling, which it was great. So Bruce circulated the recording of the hearing yesterday, and it starts right around the hour 1 minute mark, so towards the end of it. But he had really great things to say. Bruce told me he had reached out to the NeighborWorks. He specifically flagged NeighborWorks Montana as a group that is doing great work, but also spoke more broadly about the value of housing counseling. And Secretary Carson had very positive things to say in response. It's the second time in the last month or so that Secretary Carson's been asked about housing counseling, and I think it's really great that we are on the Secretary's radar, and increasingly on members' radars, particularly with Republicans. So it's really encouraging that going back years ago when we would be on the Hill, it's kind of felt like you were having to sell folks on housing counseling generally, or educate people as to what counseling was. And it seems more and more the case that not only are folks aware of it, but they're singing its praises. So I thought that was really encouraging. So we will keep you updated as we go. But Bruce, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so I think just a shout out to NeighborWorks Montana. We have talked a lot about how important it is to establish relationships, working relationships with House and Senate members. and being at the point where they call you up to see if there are any questions you want to ask the Secretary of HUD, that is just a terrific moment. And he couldn't have said it better. And obviously, the NavalWorks people from Montana had done a really good job prepping up the question and keying it up. And so in the future, if you get those calls, take advantage of them, but especially try to figure out how to make sure you have some working relationships with them so you're more likely to get that call.
Great. So move on now to the Brian Montgomery nomination. So we've talked about this. I mean, the kind of quick recap is that Brian Montgomery was nominated to be FHA commissioner going back more than 200 days ago. It's a bit frustrating because there's a lot of bipartisan agreement. There's a few folks who have been critical, but by and large, there's pretty broad bipartisan support in favor of moving this nomination forward. The disconnect just seems to be not a lot of urgency, particularly on the GOP side, since Senator McConnell controls what goes on the calendar and what doesn't. So we're just trying to move this forward as best we can. One way we're doing that is by organizing calls with key senators and counseling agencies and some other housing agencies in their states. So we have a call this afternoon with Senator Scott's office. That's Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, who chairs the housing subcommittee on the banking committee. We're going to speak with him, connect them with some groups from South Carolina. We are working on scheduling something with Senator McConnell's office, Senator Crapo, who's the chair of the banking committee, working on getting something with his office, and are hoping also to do a call with Senator Schumer's office. So that's, again, everyone kind of agrees that there's not any opposition. opposition. It's more just a matter of making it a priority. So we're just trying to make the point to, we're all in agreement that he should move forward, but we really need you to treat it with some urgency and, make the case for why it's hurting folks on the ground not having a competent leader at FHA. So those calls will happen this week and probably early next, and we'll have an update, but, we're hoping that we can put some pressure on them to move forward with this nomination.
So if you're from Kentucky or from Idaho on this call, send Matthew an email if you want to be part of the conversations with your senator. These are critical, and it's clearly valuable that local groups are part of this conversation.
And it is also worth mentioning. We ask folks to reach out to your members all the time, but it's certainly contacting senators on either side of the aisle and just saying, I need you to please go speak with either Leader McConnell or Senator Schumer, and put pressure on them. Let them know that you're hearing from your constituents and that this is needs to be a priority for everyone.
So on the email that I sent out this morning, I said I also added the phrase that we would talk about why this is important to your work. And I am continuing to hear that some of the mechanical things that we expect HUD to be able to do in terms of recognizing organizations or working with permissions to do changes in your status, all those sorts of things are not moving forward. We don't know for sure, but we suspect that the NOFA is being delayed because there's not enough hands on deck at HUD and not enough senior leadership. And I think we and actually publicly in some forums I've heard HUD people say as much that they really need some experienced hands to be there, and that was specifically aimed with Brian Montgomery. So there's a lot at stake here, and we and the problem here is not so much getting that he'll get the votes. It's simply getting an agreement between the Democrats and the Republicans about having a few hours of time to be able to raise the issues that Democrats want to raise, And essentially, Mitch McConnell has not moved to make that Brian Montgomery piece forward, and has been instead relying on, and they've been doing judicial nominations and other kinds of nominations. So this is one that, with a little bit of push, we think we can get this over the edge. The Mortgage Bankers Association and the realtors both been very strongly in favor. They've done their part, and we're kind of weighing in with local groups to do our part as well. So we think the conversations with Senator Crapo's office, with Senator McConnell's office, with Senator Schumer's office, and Senator Scott's office, all of those will be critical to this. And certainly you can contact your own senators and ask them to reach out to their leadership to make this a priority. So, well, it's important to all of us. So with that note, let's move on to our one of our favorite things, innovations in housing counseling. And I think all of you are probably familiar by now that this is really a strategy that we have been using to identify creative opportunities, innovative programs that that fit inside our world, our mission, and our goals, that do help serve our constituencies, but generate new sources of income. That in the world we live in today, that the only ability to grow will not be to rely on federal funding, but to really to be able to develop new income streams. And so today we're talking with Mayra Martinez. She's the Director of Operations and Communications at Affordable Homes of South Texas. It's a NeighborWorks organization. And what they've done is to tackle forming their own insurance company. So Mayra, are you with us?
Yes, sir, I am.
Great. Okay, good. Well, do you want to lead off, or should I ask you some questions and get you going?
Sure. Why don't you ask some questions and then we can start that way.
Tell us what the motivation was to first form this. Why did you do it? What gave you the idea? What market research did you do to move forward on this?
Sure. So the idea for social enterprise in general, not just the insurance agency, but just for the concept of creating these social enterprises, came out of the fact that, as you had mentioned, federal funding was decreasing, and we had noticed on a 5-year trend back in 2014 that our federal funding was decreasing, and if we didn't do anything to replace that gap, then we were going to end up either closing the doors or cutting off programs and laying off people, and we certainly did not want to do that. So we embraced this mentality of what we consider is something that we say all the time, which is a nonprofit is just a tax status, not a business model. And so, yes, we're a nonprofit, but we need to think more business-like minded. And so with that, we started looking at some avenues to launch some social enterprises with the premise that the profits, after paying the expenses from the enterprise, would come back into the nonprofit so we can continue our mission of affordable housing. We launched a series of social enterprises that were, such as realty, construction, and property management, and even a Blimpie sub shop. But our most recent one, which we launched in 2016, is probably the one that has the quickest return for us in terms of what we see in growth and financial investment. And that's our insurance agency, and it's called Hope Insurance. And the reason we decided to do the insurance was because a number of years ago, there was a hailstorm here in South Texas, and it basically caused insurance rates to rise. And so we noticed, because we're loan servicers, also we service our own loans, we noticed that home buyers were not shopping around to get better rates. And so insurance rates increased, their payments increased because we escrow with the payment. And we were noticing that because the payment was increasing, our delinquencies were increasing. And that was the primary reason home buyers were falling behind on payments, was because these insurance rates had skyrocketed. So when we started looking at it, we thought, what could we do? And in that vein of social enterprise, we said, let's create an insurance agency. And we began researching various models and decided to open as an independent broker versus a captive agent, so we can broker out various policies versus just being dedicated to Allstate or State Farm. And then that we could help maybe provide home buyers quotes from various insurance companies to help them support them making a better informed decision. And that's basically where the insurance agency came from.
Great. And so maybe walk us through kind of maybe tell us first sort of how successful it is, and then I'll ask you some questions about what the mechanics of setting it up. But tell us how it works first.
So our first year was our startup year in 2016, and we saw a financial return of $74,500 in commissions. 2017, we saw $105,000 in commissions, and so far for 2018, we're at $52,000, which is ahead of last year's pace. And so we're encouraged that we'll end 2018 higher than 2017. We're starting to see our renewals come in, which is great, and that's where you make most of your money off of as well. And so we're very encouraged that we see the trend increasing.
And you create a book of business, right? So that you get the initial policy and you get something from that, but it's the renewals that you build as your book gets larger, your income steadily grows. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yes, sir. And at first, we were targeting our existing homeowners with a little bit of push out to the community. But because we started the insurance agency with the primary focus of trying to help our OSTI homeowners and getting a better insurance rate, our initial year was focused on letting our homeowners know we've opened this insurance agency. If you want to shop around, you've got a choice, and so that's what happened. So that first year was truly just OSTI homeowner business. The second year, 2017, is when we started opening up or really actively marketing to the community at large. And so you'll see in our book now that we've got a healthy ratio of OSTI homeowners versus non-OSTI homeowners, which is really great because we're not just putting all our eggs in one basket.
And how do you distinguish yourself in the marketplace? What works so that people come to you as opposed to staying with their insurance or going to somebody else?
So we really pushed the concept of giving back to the community. So we're an independent broker insurance agency like any other independent broker insurance agency, with the exception that when you do business with us, you're giving back to the community in an indirect way by, the profits being reinvested in the nonprofit. So that kind of has this social cause type of warm and fuzzy feeling to it that I think, some people are saying, I really like the idea of giving back, to the community. I really like the idea you represent a nonprofit, and I think it deepens the trust that they have that the agency is not taking them for a ride, or going to be charging them high rates, because they just seems the tie back to the nonprofit makes it seem like we're more legitimate. Not to say other insurance agencies are not legitimate, but it's that whole kind of nonprofit mentality. I say the warm and fuzzy feelings about it. So we really push that social enterprise with a nonprofit connection, marketing kind of image on that. Our tagline is insurance with your best interest at heart. So we can, again, go back to that warm and fuzzy, that we're here for them. They don't have to go do business with us. And in the end, we may not provide the cheapest quote, but at least you know that your quote is a good one. I mean, your insurance is a good one. So you can, even though you stay with them. Even though you don't come with us. So it's just pushing that kind of whole concept of, giving back to the community by doing business with us. It's worked with our other entities as well, and it just seems to resonate a lot with people.
And what kinds of insurance do you offer?
Home, auto, business, life, motorcycle, and I think they even offer. I can't. Oh, my mind went blank. There was one that's kind of
full range.
Yeah,
that's
full range.
Right.
A full range.
And one of the things I know when I did insurance work was the concept of what complete, for example, in homeowners insurance, one of the issues was that there was a very bare bones homeowners that didn't have replacement coverage, wouldn't pay for your rental if you were displaced out of your house, that sort of thing. But then there's the kind of more full coverage. It was HO3 at the time. I think it has a different term now. But so do you deal with the kind of the quality of the product and the coverages as and instead of only on a price?
Right. So what our agents do, and let me also preface by saying that we were very fortunate in that when we launched the agency, in our search for someone that was going to run it, we were fortunate in meeting a lady by the name of Rosie, who has over 40 years of experience in the insurance industry, and she really kind of helped us set that agency up the way that it should be set up, and I think is one of the reasons we credit the success of the agencies, because we were just very fortunate to have a very seasoned person launch it with us. But yes, she's very good with getting the coverage that you need. So she'll say what you have, right, and she'll quote you based on what you wanted, and then she'll say, okay, now this is what you're missing. Typically, this is what you want, but in the end, it's your choice. But I'm just letting you know that you're missing these, and if you happen to need it, it's not going to get covered by the insurance. And so she lays out a very good kind of comparison, and that's why the tagline of insurance with your best interest at heart is so critical, because whether you decide to stay with us or switch to us or not, she says, she's like, you take this with you, and if you don't want to switch with us, that's fine, but take the coverage that you need, so at least you can get the coverage over there. And I think that's really been helpful, because again, it's that we're out to help you. We're not out just to, make a profit from you. We're out to help you. And I think that's just been really awesome with how the people have reacted to that. And the renewals that have come in from one year to the next has shown that. And they just trust her, and they trust the agency because of that nonprofit connection.
So this is great. So what are the licensing requirements? What did you have to do first to become an actual insurance company?
So they did have to get registered with our with the overseeing agency, and then make sure that the person that you have is trained and versed and has the accreditation. We also received we have an independent choice agency that we do. It's a logo that we put on everything, letting them know that we are an independent agent, but we're a member of that group, so it's kind of this seal of quality. I can't tell you specific licensing requirements because honestly, I can't remember the names of them, but I know it wasn't that challenging. I thought it would be harder and much more lengthy. But I know other than the individual and then the agency itself, and of course we had to create the agency as an LLC, and we did that. So it was, I think we had the concept in April, and by January of the following year in 2016, everything was, we had launched the agency.
And did you incorporate as a for-profit or a nonprofit?
So it's a for-profit. So our structure is that Affordable Homes of South Texas owns 100% of the shares of Tu Casa Investments, which is a for-profit corporation, and that for-profit corporation um, is a parent company of all of our subsidiaries, and they're all LLCs.
So, so it's a nonprofit that owns a number of for-profit pieces. And does that have tax consequences for you? How does that work?
So yeah, we have to make sure that that the unrelated business income tax kind of kicks into effect, but our legal department and our auditors and we reached out to a couple of CPAs and asked them what the best structure was when we first started launching the social enterprises, and they all recommended having a parent company that was a for-profit and having that be the arm that owns the LLCs. So you can maintain that separation from the nonprofit and limit the tax consequences, but also the legal liability.
And so Rosie, so she came with a certain amount of licensing or certification that's required. And do you have other people that also have license, or do they all fit under her? How does that work?
They have their license. We right now there's a staff of 2, and so we and the lady that Rosie brought on, has over 30 years of experience in the industry, and so we opened another location last year, and she mans that location. So we have 2 locations for the insurance agency, and then she just brought on an independent agent that we would pay as a broker, not a broker, but a contract. And they would, help with policies and stuff like that, also as a salesperson.
And Matthew, are we getting questions in, or should I keep going here?
No, we've got some. Myra's actually covered a good number of them, but we do still have some others. Someone asked, do commissions equal profit?
Do commissions equal profit?
And I suppose the
commissions would be gross income, and so the question is sort of what's your net look like on that?
And what are your expenses, I think is the other part of it.
Yeah, so numbers, I don't have the latest financials on here. I know that this last time in 2017, we haven't realized the actual investment of the money into us yet, but because it was the second year, we're on a 3-year plan to see by the end of the third year, rather by the end of 2018, we should then see the first investment of the LLC back into the nonprofit, which is the quickest turnaround we've had. We have entities that are on a 5-year plan before we see any money coming back into the nonprofit. And so this is the biggest turnaround, the quickest turnaround, and we're on path with to achieve that. I don't have specific numbers, but I can certainly share them at some in an email. I can certainly send out
I
something.
think what's most useful to people is to understand what it takes to get started and what it takes to maintain it. So that's a very interesting concept. So you had an investment from the nonprofit into to Hope, the LLC, and that meant that was going to get you through 3 years. Am I understanding that?
Well, the kickoff, yeah. So the kickoff line or the kickoff amount that we had, the initial investment was $100,000 from OSTI, and that was to launch it and and do everything. At the end of the third year, this year, we should see the return on that.
Great, fascinating.
A few people have asked how staff are paid, if it's commission, salary, or some combination.
So it's part salary and commission. So there's a bonus, with exception of Rosie. Rosie gets paid salary, but the agent under her has a base salary, and then there's a bonus incentive that she gets a certain amount for every new policy or renewal, and then we pay her monthly on that, whatever the commission or the bonus is.
Great. And you may not have this in front of you, but do you know what your homeowner's loss ratio is?
The homeowner? No, I don't have that in front of me.
All right. We can maybe get that to folks by an email.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked, so are your clients comfortable with you even though you compete with State Farm, Liberty Mutual, etc.? Are you
Mhm.
competitive with the rates?
Yes, we are. Actually, we've been finding that we are. And just to let you know of a personal, when we first launched, of course, our ED is like, look at Hope to switch of the employees. You know, you don't have to, but look at it. And I looked at it, and at the time, our insurance that I was with personally for a home and auto, was still cheaper. Fast forward, what is this? We are third year. Our insurance went up, and I looked at, went to Hope again and said, what do you think? And she said, well, let me see what if I can find anything, and so comparable and for less expensive. And so she did. And it saved us, and this is because we added a 16-year-old driver to our insurance, our car insurance. So
Good luck with that.
good luck with that, exactly. And even like that, we were able to save about total of about $400. But that's home and auto combined. And so we were, so we switched. But it is competitive, and in some cases it's not. I mean, you may have a very good rate, and that's great. And they're really good at not having this forcing kind of mentality of, get this. If they're not competitive and they can't find you a comparable coverage for less amount, they tell you, I'm sorry, what you have is good, then stay with it. So yeah, so it's quite competitive.
Great. Someone asked if all of this conflicted with any support you received from any insurance providers.
So no, in terms of, well, I take it back. Yes, in terms of sponsorships. So we have an event, and we have insurance companies that have sponsorships. We also used insurance companies to do some of our presentations to our customers during certain topics, and they were upset. And but I think the issue with those two in particular was because they had banked on our customers as the bulk of their business, and they didn't really make an effort to market in other places, or in other areas, or for other business. So if this was going to be reduced, it was going to impact them, definitely. And so they were upset, and they don't sponsor our Homebuyers Fair anymore, and that's okay, because the advantage that it's brought has far outweighed that, not just from the investment, but the investment of the money coming back into the nonprofit, but more importantly, our homeownership delinquencies, because of the insurance rates, have decreased, and that was the initial reason we even started it. And to see an impact on that end means that, yeah, it's working.
Great. Somebody asked, a few people actually asked, how do you handle marketing to folks that are coming through for education and counseling, and are there any conflict of interest issues that arise from that?
Mm-hmm. So on everything, whether it's required or not, we do an affiliated business disclosure on everything that we give to customers. Better safe than sorry. And so we tell them we have ownership in Hope Insurance Agency, and then the real estate company, and then the construction company that we have. So we're upfront about that. If at the end if during counseling they identify that maybe they can shop around for insurance, there's they don't mention Hope. They just say there's a list of insurance agencies that we've put on a kind of a referral list, only because they've cleared our initial research. So like we've made sure that they're okay with the Better Business Bureau. They don't have any complaints against them, legal action or anything like that. Sort of an Angie's List, but kind of a little bit more just local. And so and Hope is on there, but they're not at the top. They're somewhere in the middle. But the address is on there too. And so, sometimes they'll say, oh, this was just right across the street behind the center, and we'll hop over there. But we don't steer them. And I know that was very, of big concern to us, and make sure we're not steering to any of those entities. And so we've been very deliberate about when they are introduced to the fact that we have these entities and how. And then here at the servicing, There's other insurance agents that have materials up on the corner, and Hope is one of them. So but everybody's given a fair shot. It's not, Hope doesn't have a big poster when the other ones have a flyer, but it's pretty much a fair shot.
Great. And the last question we have, someone just asked about the volume of policies that you're writing and/or renewing annually.
Yeah, I had asked that that question to Rosie actually right before I popped on the call, and she is out to lunch. So I can get that in that email too, so everybody knows how many policies we're talking about in terms of number.
And who does the marketing then? Is that done by the agents or by others?
It's done by myself and my team. We do the marketing for the nonprofit and for the entities. So it helps because it's a little bit more. We can keep the integrity of our message, and we always are up to speed on the latest on the latest ways to grab our customers or potential customers for our entity. So we're looking at, we do everything from social media to mail outs to, sponsorships of other events, which is, typical of any business that's out there that's trying to promote.
And is there any sense of which channels work better for marketing?
So our social media is big. Facebook's really big for us, but it's big. It's across the board for a lot of us. What I've started to do, or going to start doing, is sort of a blog on the website that talks about, from Rosie, that talks about some things that you want to look for in insurance, and kind of a Q&A. So if people want to ask, like, my policy went up, or they're charging me for this, is this right? She can at least, provide some kind of guidance as well. But mostly it's Facebook. We have not done any traditional paid advertising in terms of radio or TV. We have done print for the newspaper, but also the electronic digital advertising on our newspaper's website, which is big. And so they get traffic off of there as well. And a lot of it lately has been word of mouth, referrals from other customers, which is always a plus. So.
Absolutely. We've done a lot of thinking about social media, and particularly Facebook, in some of our outreach events, and trying to learn more about it. But we've been doing boosting and ads, and we've talked about it some on these calls, and we'll hopefully learn more as we go. So, it sounds like this. So, I guess the big question is what are the elements that an executive director should be thinking about if they need to decide to move into this space? Maybe you could give us.
And to social enterprises in general?
I was thinking insurance companies specifically.
Okay.
I wonder if we shouldn't at some point do a whole discussion on social enterprises, because the NeighborWorks field have done a really good job in elevating this, and there's always exciting things you guys are doing. But let's just stick to the insurance company, and maybe the idea of what would be what's the checklist that you need to go through to figure out whether this is a good idea for you.
Well, the first thing is that's going to determine is the need, right? So the adage of see a need, fill a need, certainly comes into play, especially in this case. And it also depends, I think, at the position that the organization is in. For example, we are a loan servicer, and we are also we build the homes, we act as a general contractor, we finance our homes, and then we service our loans. So it's a one-stop shop with us for our customers. They make their payments with us. They're used to seeing us, and for us, it made sense. It was a kind of a no-brainer. We're seeing our customers suffering in this aspect of insurance, and they can't do anything about it. They're at the mercy of the insurance agencies or companies, and maybe there's something that we can do to provide some relief. And that was the need. And so I don't know if you're not a loan servicer, I don't know if it's going to be as an easy sell, if with your board or even with your staff. I think you'd really have to do a market analysis, because your primary customers are going to be all from the outside market, not internally, or mostly not internally. But it's really going to have to do, you're going to have to do a market analysis. You're going to have to determine whether or not there is a need for an insurance agency and or another insurance agency, and if there's enough business to support it, to where your investment from the nonprofit is going to be recaptured, and then how quickly you're going to recapture that. So again, I think we were in the fortunate position that we were a loan servicer, when we were doing this. If we were not, could I say that we would have done it? I'd be hard pressed to say that we would have. But that's supposition. I mean, that's my own personal opinion on that.
Interesting. I mean, when I did, we caught a major insurance company redlining it here in Philadelphia, and created a program with them to really aggressively get full coverage insurance into neighborhoods that have it. And what we found was, even though we had a much, much more superior product than what people normally had, that there was a lot of stickiness to their existing policies. That people don't think about insurance very much, and once
Right.
they have it, they don't ever think, well, what's my level of coverage and stuff. And
Correct.
so the challenge was to really get people to somehow pay attention to what they had and didn't have. And,
Absolutely. It's very, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that. It's true. It's one of those things that you do once a year, and you don't think about it until you need it, during the year, unless you need it. But the fact that, when we were in our loan servicing department, we were looking at these delinquencies, and we're saying, why are we having so many? And we're finding out that these insurance premiums are huge. They've gone up, in a year, they went up a tremendous amount. And the customer just didn't even think about it. Oh, it renewed. That's part of part of being a homeowner. And I don't think they maybe understood that they have a choice. They just need to make the effort to, shop around. And sometimes they think, oh, that's a bit more hassle than saving $20. But in most of the cases of our homeowners, it saved them hundreds of dollars.
wow, that's impressive. That's really impressive. Interesting. And do you know, in Texas, do they use credit scores to figure out the rate? Is it?
Some of them do. I think it depends on the agency or the company.
Right.
Yeah, some of them do.
Right. So I think that's a factor that can work against
Yes.
people who are still reliable people, but coming from low wealth communities often have lower scores.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean that they aren't reliable risks. Right. Well, so this is very helpful. Are there any quick closing thoughts before we move on? This is fascinating.
Yeah, I think that if any nonprofit is entertaining doing a social enterprise or an insurance agency specifically, I think it's worth the effort to look into it. I don't think it's something that you can ignore anymore. And you just kind of have to start changing the mentality of the organization and the board, that it's okay that we make a profit in some of these, as long as you don't make too much to where you're jeopardizing your nonprofit designation. But there's a way to do it. Just look into being the right structuring. But it's definitely worth a shot, because you just don't want to be at the mercy of these federal funding. And every year when the budget is out, and you see programs slashed to zero, or you start panicking, and people start panicking, and yes, it works its way back up, but maybe not as much as it used to be. It'd be nice, wouldn't it, for one time to start thinking like, oh, the program was slashed to zero. It's okay. We've got money coming in from our insurance agency. We don't have to worry.
Right. Well, one thing I love about insurance is that it's, as you build your book of business, your income rises, so that it's not the initial sales, it's the regular
renewals.
routine. Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
that I think is a really good investment strategy. Well, congratulations, great work, and
Thanks.
feel free to share some of your materials, and maybe even your marketing materials. People would love to see that, I'm sure, as well.
Absolutely. Will do.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you.
All right. So, one last quick thing. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but you know, rental counseling has been really not the main focus of our work, to be quite frank. But in fact, we have agencies who do a considerable amount of business, and in the rental field, especially in big cities. But it's in a number of localities, and I think we've all struggled with what the business model is, and the assumptions built into the HUD handbook and all, which really are assuming really that you're aimed at either home ownership, purchase, or maintenance of home ownership, and not as geared towards rental issues. Um, the but it's a critical issue. I mean, in fact, the proportion of families that rent versus our homeowners is continues to increase, and as homeownership becomes more difficult, it becomes the rent is just a bigger part of what the population has, and so I wanted to make sure that people are kind of aware of what the trends and thinking is, and so what some of the cutting edge issues are in the field, and this this issue around evictions has really been raised by Malcolm Desmond. He's an award-winning journalist, and I think he's at Princeton now as well as and teaching. But he spent, I think it was like 18 months, some period of time in Milwaukee, living with different families who are very, very low income. And one of the things that he really found as kind of a driving force about what really created chronic poverty and was really damaging was if somebody got into a place where they had an eviction, that it's such a huge financial setback that people don't recover from it, and will continue to be in a cycle of where they will move into places and will again have another crisis. And the problems you can imagine are pretty obvious. It's obviously damaging to your credit history. Some localities, landlords keep track of who's been evicted. There's you often lose possessions. You have to come up with security deposits and moving expenses to do that, or you overburden another family and move in with them. And it's quite a crisis. It's very disruptive for the kids who may have to change schools, who have to scramble, and especially if the sheriff's involved, it can be incredibly upsetting to it's not an orderly process. It comes out of nowhere one day. And I think it's a critical issue that Desmond sort of thought about as to the extent that we could stop foreclosures of evictions, that we would be solving a major piece of poverty in America that makes it more chronic, more cyclical. And and his thought at the time had been that there was a whole discussion about reducing the mortgage interest deduction on mortgages from $1 million mortgages down to $500,000 mortgages, and that taking a major part of that money, you would have more than enough to. Right now, only about a quarter of the people eligible for Section 8 subsidies actually get it. There's just not enough money out there. But if you did something like that, you would be able to more than fund a broad Section 8 program. And what happens is you take that challenge off the list. And typically, what triggers these evictions are, and it could be a job layoff or an illness, but it's also people have some incident that happens where they have a car, they need to go to work, and the brakes go in the car. They have to use the rent money to pay for the brakes. I mean, people who are really kind of on the margin, and there's been a number of really excellent studies about rent burden and how people, it's kind of widely thought that 30% of your income should go towards rental housing, and there's quite a healthy segment of the United States where people are paying much more than that, and often 50%. And so it means that there's sort of this chronic state of someone has to get medicines, they have to do things, they have to get things for the kids, that they end up having to make choices between rent and other expenses that can trigger all these problems. So it's had a profound effect. And what Desmond has done is to continue after he published a book called Eviction that won the Pulitzer. He's been going around the country talking. If you ever have a chance to hear him, he's very, very compelling. And part of it is that he's sympathetic to poor people. And frankly, this is a problem in the world. It's that people are not very sympathetic to poor people's situations, and it becomes off quite as a hostile world. And he really has deep insight into how people lived and their own personal generosity and how they tried to take care of their families in difficult circumstances. So this becomes a very kind of compelling thing to read. He's also trying to bring this, elevate this issue as a major social problem in the United States, and going against the current, as you know, of the way that federal spending is happening now and subsidies. But it's an important issue to be raising. So if you ever have a chance to hear him, you really want to go out of your way to do it. But he's created this eviction lab, and just click the link and go into your city and see where your city fits in, or where your state. Or it's quite an eye opener to look at it. There's quite a bit of resources in there. And certainly, in terms of if you are doing this work and need to write funding proposals, this could be a helpful tool and all that. And certainly, feel free to email me if you're doing rental work. I would love to figure out a conversation we can have, maybe on one of the leaders' calls or some other forum, about how to make this into a more viable model and how to address people's needs more effectively. Important part of the life that we have. So with that quick note, so we've had a terrific time with NHRC memberships. I'm very pleased to say, we'll have to put up a list of all the new groups that have joined in the last few months. And some have joined because they want to be part of the movement, and we certainly have had a whole flurry of joinings because we have now the discounted credit report fees, and glad to have that be of service, but also hope that you're joining because you're really supporting the work that we do and helping us keep it to be independent. We will have and certainly if you've got any questions about membership, email me. That's one of my top priorities. I'm always on it, always happy to send you a membership application, answer questions around the credit reports or whatever. It's a key part of our work, and we really do deeply appreciate the fact that so many of you have already joined. Our next call will be on May 3rd, and we'll have Tiffany Ang from Common Solutions. They have a CMS that's been being used that could be available to other groups, and so she'll talk about that, and we're also in discussions about possibly having another guest as well. So again, we'll bring you up to date about the latest issues. Hopefully we'll have some progress to say on Brian Montgomery. We'll see. So please don't be shy about reaching out to your senators. It's important work, and it helps move everybody forward. So with that quick note, I'm going to we'll close off the call a few minutes early. Thanks, everybody.